Caterina, should we start?
Yes, Luca, you're welcome to start. We have 41 attendees at the moment.
Okay. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all participants and eminent speaker. My name is Luca Rossi and I work for the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction. In particular, I'm the Deputy Chief of the Regional Office in Africa. And on behalf of UNDRR, I'm honored to welcome you all to the first seminar organized in cooperation with the African Union Commission and our scientific partner, CIMA Research Foundation. The idea of this session, of this actually series of 4 seminars, comes from the analysis of the achievement of the last 2.5 years of work, which were carried out in cooperation with the African Union, the regional economic communities, member states, UN entities, and other international organizations, as well as multiple stakeholders within the context of a large project, which was sponsored by the European Union and by the Secretariat of the African, Caribbean and Pacific Group of States, which was named Building Disaster Resilience to Natural Hazard in Sub-Saharan African region, countries and communities. During the discussion that were following the closing of the program, we realized that the results achieved by this project were far behind the deliverables featured in the work plan, as they trigger additional reflections about the development of continental roadmap for holistic, inclusive, and actionable policies for disaster risk reduction, climate change adaptation, and sustainable development. Hence, what we said is, okay, let's try to keep the momentum and keep all these stakeholders engaged, and we try to immediately applicate this work on the development of a roadmap for improving the availability, access, and use of disaster risk information for early warning and early action on one side, but also in support of the DRR agenda in Africa. And this roadmap has been piloted in some of the beneficiary countries during the last phase of this project, and also engaged other entities at the supranational level, including regional economic communities and the African Union Commission. What we want to do now with this series of webinar is to share with you this experience and to engage you, because we want to also collect feedback and ideas and suggestions how to move this forward, also from those countries or other entities which were not initially engaged in this pilot phase. The webinars will critically assess the priorities set in the roadmap to inform key short and mid-term investments, which are required for the development and improvement of an harmonized system of early warning for early action and transboundary risk management across the African continent. They will consider the advantage and will discuss the advantages of having a continental roadmap that will foster on early warning system with a consistent approach across the continent. We will assess also the advantages and the challenges of the risk profiles based on probabilistic risk assessment, generated through a common policy, a common methodology across all the different countries. And finally, they will further elaborate on possibilities for quantitative risk profiles to inform the DRR agenda at the national and eventually regional and continental scales. So the webinar that we planned are 4, as it was described in the concept note. The first one is going to focus on regional and national roadmap, experience sharing and recommendation from regional and national scientific partner. And it will equally touch upon the harmonized methodology for generation of risk profiles to support the implementation of this roadmap. A second workshop will take place on the week of the 31st of August or beginning of September. This is still to be confirmed, depending also on the availability of our speakers. and it will focus on the implementation of continental, regional, and national roadmap for early warning and transboundary risk management, particularly focusing on the development of common standard operating procedures to exchange data and analyze data relevant for this purpose. And equally touch on the use of risk profile to support to use this data in the most effective way. The workshop on the third workshop will be in around the 28th of September 2020, and we'll discuss about the plurality of potential use of quantitative risk profiles to support disaster risk reduction and risk informed investment. And the final one, which is featured by the mid of October, will deal with the methodology of quantitative risk assessment for subnational, national, and regional level assessment. So the one of today, as just anticipated, will will be very focused on the development of the roadmap at the national, sub-regional, regional level. It will feature experiences gathered from the countries where we piloted this work, and equally how this was carried on by stakeholders at the sub-regional, regional level, namely the regional economic communities and of course the African Union. Indeed, we cannot talk about early warning system without having on board the WMO, which is the mandated organization dealing with this topic. So we will be extremely interested in listening how this can be harmonized at the continental level, and what are the mandatory steps that we need to take in order to succeed in this goal. So as I was saying, several eminent stakeholders will accompany us during this trip, and these include WMO, these include the African Union Commission, IGAD as representing the regional economic communities. We have our scientific partner, CIMA Research Foundation, and then of course we will have representatives of the countries who benefited of this initial pilot that we did in the context of this project. But before we start going into the discussion, I would like to give the floor to Amjad Abashar, who is the director of the UNDRR Regional Office for Africa, for his welcome remark and opening addresses. Amjad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Luca, for this opportunity. Let me just join you quickly in welcoming our good colleagues and my fellow panelists that we have with us today. Amos Makaro, who's the chief of the WMO Regional Office for Africa. Our colleague and good friend Kai Gatkoth, the DRR coordinator from the African Union Commission. Andre Kamga, Director General of ACMAD. Kefla Sabato, who's the DRR coordinator for IGAD. And Roberto Rodari, the research director from the CIMA Research Foundation. A warm welcome to you. And also a warm welcome to all the participants and other panelists from the other departments and other UN and non-UN agencies. In particular, I want to recognize DG ECHO, representatives from Tanzania, Zambia, Ethiopia, OCHA, UNDP, and the African Development Bank. If you will allow me, I just wanted to say a few words to introduce a few opening remarks, and to welcome you to this first of the 4 webinars on using risk information and disaster risk profiles to inform disaster risk reduction and decision making. As Luca mentioned, the title of this first webinar will focus on the roadmap for improving the availability, access, and use of disaster risk information for early warning and early action in support of the DRR agenda in Africa, as well as the Agenda 2063, as well as the program of action for implementing the Sendai framework in Africa that is managed by the African Union. Now, of course, the motivation for this webinar series really comes from the gathered experience we've had over the last 2.5 years, where we partnered with UNDRR, partnered with the AUC, ACMAD, and the regional economic communities, and as well as the 16 member states, UN partners, the Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, NGOs, all of whom were involved in a process to generate these national probabilistic risk profiles. Now, of course, this process, we wouldn't have gotten into this stage if without the support of the ACP EU program on building resilience of nations and communities in Africa. Now, even though this program ended this year, we're pleased that we look forward to continuing to benefit from the support of the European Union through ECHO. Through this support, we are able to generate risk knowledge and develop options for the practical use of risk information. And more importantly, this resulted in a broad and active engagement of the multiple stakeholders. Now, if you go back to the Sendai Framework Priority 1, it's really about leveraging knowledge for the purpose of disaster risk assessments, including for the development and implementation of appropriate preparedness and effective response to disasters. And this is an area that we would like to focus on looking forward. The Sendai Framework also calls for national governments to strengthen their technical and scientific capacity in order to consolidate their existing knowledge and to develop and apply methodologies and models to assess disaster risk reduction. So we were able to achieve much of this over the last 2.5 years. For example, first of all, the systematic engagement of multiple stakeholders in the risk profiling process has allowed us to have fundamental access to data and information which was not accessible in the past. And this has resulted in an important improvement in the quality of the risk profiles that were produced. The second point is that we've been able to increase and test our understanding of the multiple applications of risk profile. And I believe that some of them will be presented here, and others will be discussed more in depth in the upcoming webinars. The third focus result of this process has been our ability to learn from the efforts of international organizations outside of Africa, so-called supranational organizations, which enabled us to build on good examples of their good examples related to the role they play in harmonizing early warning systems and the collection, analysis, and use of data according to the common methodologies of protocols. And lastly, most importantly, it has enhanced and refined the DRR coordination experience in Africa. And this is an important result of the experience that we've had so far in developing these things, these risk profiles. So in relation to this last priority, priority 4 of the Sendai Framework, I recall that it calls for an enhancement of disaster preparedness for effective response at the global regional levels. In this regard, the role of the African Union and the RECs and all international stakeholders is essential, especially to support the promotion, development, and dissemination of instruments such as standards and codes and operational guidelines to support coordinated action in disaster preparedness and response, and also to facilitate information sharing among all stakeholders. So we are now closer to being able to define the roles of partners because of this initiative, and also define the role of the multiple stakeholders that are engaged in this effort. Especially since the capacities and needs have been identified to strengthen each organization's active role. In some of the countries, national national DRR authorities, for example, have taken the process even further, and they've replicated the training, and currently they're looking for other partners to continue the work on the risk profiling and early warning. So for the 4 plans webinars that we'll be taking on in the next few weeks, we'll be touching upon the points I mentioned above, the key 4 points, and we'll also share with you all this experience and hopefully be able to strengthen our effort by gathering your additional ideas and inputs. So we'll begin now from the component related to the harmonization of early warning systems from national to sub-regional and continental level, with the aim of linking the most accurate forecast to the most effective response to save lives and protect achieved development gains. So I'll stop here and hand over to our distinguished moderator. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Amjad, for your welcome remarks, for linking these activity and putting these in the right context, particularly in relation to this entire framework for disaster risk reduction. And specifically, I want to thank you for remarking the importance of having an enhanced coordination mechanism in place, which recognize roles and responsibility of the different stakeholders across the continent when we are talking about early warning system, because this is very much instrumental to ensure the effectiveness of this early warning system. Now, talking about early warning, I cannot do anything different than giving the floor to WMO. And I would like to ask Amos Makarau, Chief of the WMO Regional Office for Africa, to share his experience and view, and to tell us about, to put this into the right perspective when we are planning to establish a regional early warning system. So focusing on what is the relevance of access and exchange data across different stakeholders, and to analyze them according to the same methodologies and analysis tool, because this is what will make it a regional system. Never forgetting that early warning is and will always remain responsibility of the national governments, but to facilitate the entire process, exchange is definitely a must. Amos, the floor is yours. You have 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you very much, Luca. And also, I'd like to begin by congratulating Amjad for an excellent introduction. Can you hear me?
Sure, loud and clear.
Loud and clear.
Yes, thank you very much. So on behalf of the WMO Regional Office for Africa and my colleagues in the region, we'd like to thank you for inviting us to this very important webinar and subject on NWSs. Our focus on the NWSs and not much on the risk profiling, because there are experts there, CIMA Foundation, and experts in this regard. We in WMO were very excited about this, mainly because the issue of early warnings has been very critical right throughout. And when we relocated from Geneva to Africa, it was actually one of our mandates was to look at this, and we're working very well with AUC. Because of 5 minutes, I'm assuming that this presentation will be given to others, and therefore I will not have to read word by every point. And then secondly, also, I'm assuming that this presentation will be used throughout. Now, the issue about disasters is that most of them in Africa are actually related to meteorology, and they are also transboundary in nature, and as well regional in terms of characteristics. In other words, each sub-region has similar characteristics in terms of the disasters they occur, whether tropical cyclone activity or whether locust invasions, or etc., etc. So this is actually the issue which is very critical when talking about transboundary issues. Also, most of these disasters are actually upstream of countries, and that requires a regional approach when we talk about these disasters. And then we have many players in this, whether it's UN agencies or UNDRR, for example, OCHA, WFP, FAO, WMO, they are also very much interested in this, and they look at it from their own perspective. And unfortunately, up until now, we're seeing that a lot of, not much has been put in terms of early warning, but focus has been put on responses to disasters. Now, next, please. Next slide, please, Marco. Yes, sorry. Next slide, Marco. Anyway, okay. Now the next, okay, while we're preparing this presentation, the next question is, what is the, okay, is there a need for partnerships at the REC level? Marco, presentation number 2, do you have it? Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, Amos, your slide is on screen.
No, it's okay. Can you put on the next one, please? Next one, please. The next slide. Okay, okay, doesn't matter. Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry for that.
Number 2, not recommendations. The second slide, slide number 2. Before recommendations, one before. The need for partnerships. Yeah, okay, that one. No, the need for partnerships. Yes, okay. Okay, all right, okay, looks like there's a problem there. All I was simply saying that as of now, okay, the approach to disasters has been, okay, by each entity. In other words, it is single-mindedness, silo mentality. These have not been very, very effective in the sense that they are working at the national level, and then 2, each entity is coming with its own. Obviously, there's a problem that in the sense that we're talking about many individual early warning systems, and this need to be harmonized. Yes, okay. If you look at it, okay, there have been many independent and individualistic early warning activities being conducted in Africa, and sometimes many of them occurring in the same country. There's been a duplication of efforts, obviously. There's not actually even wastage of resources. And when we talk about capacity development, it has not been well organized. So obviously, there's need for partnership to avoid duplication of efforts, and also to make sure that this talk about sustainability. And as a result, if you look at it as a result, there's no country or REC in Africa which is ready for the next disasters, mainly because this has not been harmonized. And therefore, we are very glad that IAUC and UNDRR are making this effort so that at least these are harmonized. And this particular series is testimony to that. We need to eliminate or minimize the silo mentality, and the RECs have a bigger role to play in this regard because, like I was saying, these issues, these disasters or early warning systems are transboundary. And so in the last slide there, I'm talking about the role of the AUC in engaging the international development partners, as well as enabling countries, governments to come up with governance systems. Okay, to conclude, okay, I'm talking about the recommendations. Okay, it is very critical that regional early warning units be re-established. They were there before, but they were decommissioned. These need to be put in place, and this must be linked with national early warning units. And in each of these, there are partners that are involved. For example, in this case, I'm talking about med services, I'm talking about needs of agriculture, water, health, finance, and then the UN organizations, okay, should actually come in, okay, whether it's UNDRR, OCHA, FAO, WFP, because in the UNDP, all of these are playing a very critical role, and they should be brought together, not forgetting the private partners, particularly in the dissemination of these early warning systems. So this is something which but also each REC should have a one-stop shop with a full-time secretariat for early warning of these disasters. We should now plan for disasters every year, and UNDRR, okay, with its outreach and experience, can actually bring these entities together so that every year we have a full-time secretariat that will be working on this. So, but last but not least, issue of capacity development, whether it's technical, administrative, but CIMA Foundation is coming in, for example, with this expertise on risk profiling at the regional level. These are very critical at the REC level, and definitely I'm very glad that the emphasis is now moving from the countries to the regions, and also putting the partners together. This I can stop here for now, but definitely partnerships are very critical, not only at the continental level, from policy, AUC to the RECs, and as well as the national entities with the UN organizations coming in. And last but not least, as you can see, if you want to go fast, you go alone. But if you want to go far, you work with others. It's all about partnerships. And I come from a very poor family background, and I used to have louse, you know, and they say you cannot kill a louse with one finger. You need more than 2 fingers. All is about partnerships. Thank you very much. I'll stop here for now.
Thank you very much, Amos. Very much appreciated contribution. Thanks for reminding us that 80% of the disaster have basically hydrometeorological triggers. That no country, no regional economic communities is ready to face the next disaster. We know that partnership is key, and exchanging knowledge and experience and data and analysis tools, this is really the key to move forward and to be more effective if we want to deal with this kind of risk and the related impact. So thanks a lot. We'll come back to you later on. I would like now to pass the floor to African Union Commission, to our estimated friend Gatwal Kai, coordinator of the Disaster Risk Reduction Unit at the Department of Rural Economy and Agriculture of the African Union Commission. And of course, we would like to see African Union vision about the strategic need and the potentialities of having an effective continental early warning system, and what is the role that each institution could play in this. Kai, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca. Good afternoon, colleague. Good morning, wherever you are. Good afternoon, partners. I've seen many of you online, and thank you so much for your interest in this topic. On behalf of the EU Commission, I would like to take you briefly on our current plans when it comes to early warning systems. Over time, we have been talking on this topic, and I think almost every African working group meeting or every ministerial session has a decision on early warning systems. And we must all agree that this is a very important element if we have to reduce disaster losses by 2030. Please go to the next slide. As the background was very clear as given by Luca, through the program Building Disaster Resilience to Natural Hazards in Sub-Saharan Africa region, countries and communities, which was funded by the European Union through the ACP Secretariat. We had one dedicated resource on risk knowledge, and this resource area built a very strong foundation on helping countries to support them to develop risk profiles. And so far, we had 16 countries. And based on that, we, toward the end of the program, we developed a roadmap that would then define a multi-hazard early warning system. And that roadmap was informed by also several lessons, as mentioned by Amjad. We were, lucky to be hosted by the Italian Civil Protection to go through the systems. And I must assure you that this is one of the best systems we have globally. And we felt that this system really resonates with so many African countries. We also visited the European Emergency Response Coordination Center in Brussels, which is operated by ECHO and funded by DEPCO. We also went to DG Groves with regard to data. The manager Copernicus, which basically the European satellite. And all these lessons really informed our current thinking because they are very, very relevant. The European setting is also very relevant to the African Union setting. And then we sat with the countries and developed the roadmap, which outline feedback loops between different operational centers at continental level. We also foresee that this roadmap must be preceded by a comprehensive institutional framework and standard operating procedures. Next, please. There is, as I said earlier, there is to some extent some early warning information that exists. And this information, we can work with it for now, meanwhile we're advancing the early warning information infrastructure and the rest. The major challenge, that is facing Africa, as clearly mentioned by Amos, is that we actually, most of the time, we fail to translate early warning information into concrete action. And some of these challenges are lack of coherent institutional arrangements and also lack of ex-ante financing. Most of the time, we don't have financing to implement anticipatory measures. We get money at the end of the day to respond for disaster recovery. And I think that is the challenge. So if we have to rethink outside the box and use some of that funding that we use for disaster response for anticipatory measures, I think part of the problems would be reduced. And of course, the development of the institutional and operational framework is key to finding challenges related to financing as well. Because sometimes we have resources sitting in different institutions, different stakeholders. But if we have a very good institutional framework, we'll be able to make use of existing resources that we have. And for that, we are now embarking on developing the institutional framework for early warning system at continental level. Our current thinking is with funding from donors and partners, we hope to have this framework in place by early next year. Next, please. And of course, the institutional framework will be informed by a comprehensive assessment of early warning system at all levels. And that is also something on the pipeline. As I said earlier, a multi-stakeholder consultation will need to be undertaken to further inform the framework. And of course, the framework will form the basis for operationalization of situation rooms at continental, regional, and national levels. Next, please. Next, please. I think that is, okay. Yeah, due to increasing intensity of natural hazard, I think there is a need for this situation room to communicate to one another, because disasters are becoming more transboundaries in nature. And therefore, there is really need for better coordination and better exchange of information. Of course, we also need better use of existing resources and employ better technology. Now, starting from 2021, we intend to work with the REX very closely, and of course with our member state and partners, to operationalize the frameworks using available resources and building on existing mechanisms. And where there are existing early warning systems, we will need to harmonize or build linkages with those existing early systems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kai, for your contribution. Also very much appreciated. Very interesting one, particularly for putting out the relevance of having a regional early warning system, the strategic relevance of having a regional early warning system. The need, of course, to link to these to legal and institutional framework, which can frame the relation and the responsibility from the different stakeholder, who is doing what according to which modalities, and how this can be as effective as possible. And of course, the need to have continental situation room that can monitor and track and collect information and supervise that everything is running in the smoothest possible way, to fill the gaps, even when sometimes there are issue at the national or sub-regional level with, because maybe the disaster strike and the centers which are in charge for this early warning system at the national level, they are eating themselves from this disaster. So thank you very much for your contribution. I would now like to move from the strategic to the technical need and requirements. And for this reason, I would like to give the floor to Andre Kamga, Director General of the ACMAT, the African Center of Meteorological Application for Development, who will tell us what are the requirements for tools for transboundary coordination and integrated information system. Andre, the floor is your 5 minutes. I see that we are going already a bit late, so please stick to the assigned time slot. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear, go ahead.
Okay, good. So thank you for inviting us and giving us this opportunity to discuss with you what we consider as a priority for investment to actually set up this multi-hazard early warning system. So my presentation will focus on the elements of an information system which is at the base of activities in the situation rooms. So basically the information system have a database, a processing layer, and then an interface, web interface, and other interfaces that have to communicate information. So what is expected in this information system are basically risk profiles, risk assessment products that will help the emergency systems to strategize and operate in a well-informed environment. So in the risk assessment process, we have, first of all, the monitoring and forecasting the hazards, where ACMAT and the regional climate centers in different sub-regions, as well as national Met services, are effectively working on. So this first group is the first layer of institutional setup that we need for the information system. For the risk assessment also, we need coping capacity assessments, which involve the civil protection agencies and disaster management agencies in different countries. So this is a second layer of institutional setup we need to have around the information system. And the third element in the assessment system is the exposure and vulnerability analysis, where CIMA and other research and innovation partners are involved. So you have here the institutional setup and the technical information that should go inside this system for it to work effectively. Next slide, please. In our past discussions and exchange and visits, the Italian Civil Protection Agency operates this system called UandRR, which is the technical or the engine behind the information system. So we are currently discussing approaches to actually transfer this tool in Africa, which actually have the three functions that I mentioned. It's a database management system. It is a processing tool, and it provides a good web interface for disaster managers and all those involved in humanitarian activities to have what is necessary to decide. Next slide. Next slide, please. Yeah, so in the past activities, ACMAT was funded by European Union in a project called MESA, Monitoring of the Environment for Security in Africa, basically to provide climate services for disaster risk reduction. So this slide shows you the set of needs that we gathered during that project to really understand what we will be developing climate services for. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is one of the products that the services that we developed. It is a hazard scenario for the next 30 years or so, and it has gone very quickly. So it shows basically for June, July period, floods as the most likely hazards that will hit the coastal Gulf of Guinea region. And as you may know, this year in Cote d'Ivoire, in Abidjan, over the past year in Sierra Leone, we had very significant heavy rainfall with floods. So this scenario is indicating that this specific hazards is expected to persist and even intensify in that location. And this information is required to be put into the DOA trust system and the information system to help do some strategic and operational decisions. So we are proposing 4 key steps to actually implement this information system. First, address the problem of observations that we have, improve access to observations of high impact weather and climate. Second, strengthen our generation of monitoring and forecasting products. Third, supporting effective delivery, and then preparation and response plan design, considering the multi-hazard situation, including even biological hazards like COVID that we know about. And then the step 4 is capacity building for the countries to effectively use these systems in warnings, in situation rooms, in emergency management planning and implementation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andre. This was a very interesting contribution, guiding us on what are the technical needs to implement this continental early warning system. I do really appreciate the focus that you have put on the vulnerability layer and in understanding the capacity of the coping system, because to really quantify the potential impact of disaster, the weather forecasts are not often enough. So vulnerability information and equally the capacity of responding system are key, so that when we have this complete information and the complete risk scenario, we can better prioritize and plan our intervention. Equally important, the last point that you made in terms of what are the next steps, because this is exactly in line with what we've been discussing, and we are really supportive of your approach. So again, thank you very much for your contribution. I think the next one, we move from the continental to the sub-regional level, and I would like to give the floor to IGAD, Mr. Kefle Maria Sebato, DRR coordinator at IGAD and IPAT, and also long friend of UNDRR. Kefle, you are going to talk about the need for transboundary coordination and the role that REX can play in this early warning architecture at the regional level. The floor is yours. You have again 5 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca. Good afternoon, everybody. I will directly go to my presentation. Now, thank you as well for organizing this. The need for the establishment of early warning system and for early action, its importance cannot be overemphasized. And recently, in the last 6 months, we have learned from the IGAD region that when we were compounded by multiple of hazards that cause disasters of COVID-19, the desert locust surge is still going on. And then, of course, some member states, of course, with flood. And we have learned the hardest way that there must be a need for multi-hazard early system for early action. So this debate is timely. Now, if I want to share what we think here, okay, currently where are we? What is the state of affairs we are having here? I think a multi-hazard early warning system is still at the early stage, and then if it exists, it is fragmented here and there for health somewhere, for floods somewhere else, for drought, etc. And I agree with Amos from on this aspect that the issue of the fragmentation, that's what it is existing. And then again, there is still lack of a dedicated center for continuous monitoring of hazards, which will help us in generating early warning information. It's also compounded again with the capability of advanced technology to monitor and identify hazards. And again, when I want to bring to the debate is we need to be very clear when we want to play a role as a regional level. Is it transboundary coordination, or is it a regional? For us, we take it as a regional. May not be important, but I think when we are defining what role the RECs should play, we need to be very clear on this issue. The other issue that we would like to bring is the policy level coordination. There is a need for a multi-hazard early warning system that can build upon attributes already existing in IGAD, for instance. There are the DRM Technical Advisory Committee mechanisms, which are from the member states. And there are other as well that we can build. And the RECs, we believe that they can also play a pivotal role in power and a powerhouse and clearinghouse for early warning action, which are very important. Next, please. Next. Hello. Okay. Now, what we also we need to take into account is that any initiative has to be contextualized to the regional and then the national of the interested regional economic communities and then the countries. Now, if I want to share with you what existing tools we have, for instance, in IGAD, I think we have disaster risk management and climate change adaptation strategy aligned to Sendai, which we will work on and takes all into context the risk aspect of the early warning. We have recently developed a framework for flood risk management for the IGAD region. And another forum that we also will help is the IGAD Climate Prediction and Application Center, the Outlook Forum, where different sectors come and take the Outlook products. And then from this policy level coordination role that can be plays the coordination and harmonization of initiatives can be really tackled if it's clearly defined the roles in at the regional level, and they can exist with some linked with some existing tools. The next slide, please. Okay, Marco, next slide. Okay, now here, when we think of establishing a regional or continental or national early warning system for early action, it's important that member countries, the continental body and the RECs should really at the very beginning define the scope and objectives. What is the scope? Is it only limited to one or two hazards, or it is multi-nature hazards? This is bring us now back to the current one, now to the COVID, for instance, where we're caught off guard and then we're not prepared for such health hazards. And then again, if we are thinking of establishing one, and then we need to take the the hazards, the regional contexts that prevails in the regions and the countries, and define exactly what is the scope and the objective to achieve. Again, it's important to take into account what are the key functions that the early warning system will play. Is it hazard identification and monitoring? Is it about coordination and response? And the capacity building, which is very important, has been said earlier by the last speaker, and dedicated resource mobilization. These are the things that it has to be thought during the initial period of thinking. And then from this, it will also take out the issue of the partnership. Yes, we have partners actually like the UN system, ISDR, WMO, etc. So, and then this partnership is important to have a linkage with them. And again, what lessons can we learn from other global centers who have already established such things, so that we can learn from their initiative and from their challenge to overcome what we think. And again, of course, there could be some good practices at the regional and continental level, global. We have to take stock as well of such things. And then again, the equipping with the state-of-the-art technologies for capacity development is very important now. We are thinking about the early warning system for early action. Now, the last slide, please, if you have some time, is now there are some challenges here that we think we need to address during the development of siting. One is the initial costs involved in the REX and the member states level. Yeah, that has to be thought of as a preliminary. And then of course, the partners can come in, but this is also important. Okay, I'm coming. And then again, there is no, I cannot conclude there is sufficient understanding of the importance of hazard in action. And then early action still is perceived as a humanitarian response because the group mobilizes resources for the response of COVID, a simple example, and those are costs. But do we have such a resource also for the prevention? And the need to have a supportive records for a level, for instance, after the early warning, it has to be the matter for the response for the early action, like the response funds establishing as a regional, continental, regional, and country level. Last is agreeing, then is the challenge, the best institutional setup for the operation of the multi-hazard early warning system for early action is another challenge that has to be thought at the very beginning. So with this, I rest my case. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Kefre. Always very nice listening to you. Thank you for mentioning again what is the strategic advantage of having regional economic communities engaged in these activities, for focusing again on the importance of establishing a very effective partnership through all the system to facilitate these exchanges. And finally, equally and probably even most important, the focus that you put on the need of allocate appropriate resources. But I would even add about the optimization of the use of the resources, building on what both you and Amos have mentioned before, particularly referring to the multitude of the pluralism of early warning systems, which sometimes are dedicated to very specific objective, but they take steps from the common data and information. So we are often paying multiple times the models, the data, the access to data that we could use for multiple purposes. But maybe we can come to this point later on in the question and answer session, or it will come up from contribution of other colleagues. So I don't want to take more time on this. I will now give the floor to Roberto Rudari, who is Research Director at CIMA Foundation and was the project manager for the CIMA contribution to this program. And Roberto will give us some information about other even potential use of risk profiles and how this can be used effectively for quantitative early warning system. Roberto, the floor is yours for the next 5 minutes. Go ahead.
Thank you, Luca. And it's always, difficult. Hello, everyone. It's always difficult, to take the word as the last one, of the preventers, especially when all the other presentation basically highlighted all the key points that needed to be raised. But basically, I would like, to stress maybe a few factors, because in 5 minutes, I cannot do more than that. And the first one is like the reiteration of the incredible opportunity that, the African continent is having now. When we were first, committing to the production of the risk profiles, we were clear on the fact that we needed to devise an evaluation, an assessment that was a multi-purpose one. So we needed to basically inform, different type of applications. Here we listed, some key ones, the evaluation of some disaster risk reduction activities, the determination and evaluation of contingency funds, for example, or risk transfer option, and certain, to inform, for example, impact-based early warning systems. So for us, it was more important to concentrate not just on the assessment, but on the methodology of, these assessments, so that we start, to talk, the same language. And of course, this language, is really important when we come to early warning system, where, the first pillar of the definition of the early warning system is certain, disaster risk knowledge. And one of the advantages of having developed such a methodology, which is based on a fully probabilistic risk profile, Marco, if you can go on, is certainly consistency. So basically, we will have like a consistency framework, a consistent framework that we've been using, in terms of, for example, modeling, okay, that we can use and reuse, for example, in early warning context. Okay, so that we have not just a consistency that is only ontological, but really practical, okay, in a sense. So the models that we are using, for example, in the case of floods to derive the hydrological forecast are the ones, used for the risk evaluations and can be used for the forecast. And certainly if we are talking about the impact forecast, we can use and reuse, as it was, for example, stated by Ahmad very well, information about vulnerability, about capacity, about the assets that are exposed, and we have like a very stringent methodology for their evaluation and preparation. If you can go on. And this, another advantage there, which normally when we talk about early warning systems, is we refer to impacts, related to some topical scenarios. So normally we refer to some topical scenarios like the worst case or like the most probable one. In this case, we can do something more. We can analyze those, scenarios, but extracting them from an exhaustive, set of scenarios so that we have an idea also of their own relative frequency and likelihood. You can imagine the power of that. Is one thing, to say, oh, we experienced a very bad flood, this year in this place, or you can say, we experienced like a flood that, we expect to have like every 2 years or every 10 years or every 15 years. You know that, your actions, your lesson learned will be different because of the frequency with which you are expecting, those impact, to happen on the territory. And this is like, one of the things that, we can do, using this common ground, offered by the risk profiles. Can go on, Marco. Thank you. And among the advantages, I think, this has been reiterated and strengthened by all of the speakers before, is having the possibility of defining coherent standing operating procedure in a transboundary context. So, we started from the national risk profiles and setting a language done, by the metrics, done by the methodology that is applied, that, put together at the same table, all the different institutions involved in facing the disasters at national level. We can do now, the same at regional level, the same at supranational level, for example, the continental level. So we really have set a common vocabulary, okay? So that, we can really address all these things, using the same language. I would say that, this is more or less, all about I wanted to say, as like, just let me stress the fact that, we have like an incredible opportunities. One of the reasons why UNDRR didn't want to lose the momentum that we gained like with these, 3 years of very hard work, because we are at the point where really we can make it happen. We have very solid basis, to really go on and define these SOPs, from the really practical point of view for transboundary cooperation on one side, but also like a national level, regional and continental level, across, the different scales. I think that's, I can stop here already. Luca, you're muted.
Sorry, so I was wasting another couple of seconds. But thank you very much again for your contribution in this webinar for sure, but particularly during the work that we have done in the carrying out of these, in the generation of these risk profiles, and in supporting all the beneficiaries and ourselves on how to make the best use of them. This largely contributed to enhance the coordination capacity at the different level. Now we have basically closed with the list of speakers to introduce the setting, and we would like to discuss a little bit with all of you on how this can be moved forward, learning from your experience. Particularly, we would like to ask the representative of the countries who have contributed to the generation of the national roadmap and ask them to share their experience in this regard. And also other kind of stakeholders, including donors who have supported us in this process. And the first in the pipeline I would like to engage is Alexandre Castellano, technical assistant for Southern Africa and Indian Ocean region, who can tell us a bit about what are the ECHO plans to support the implementation of this roadmap. ECHO, Alexander, the floor is yours for the next 3 minutes only, sorry.
Thank you, Luca, and I hope you can all hear me fine. Yeah, okay. So just in a nutshell, ECHO is working, I will talk about Southern Africa and Indian Ocean region because this is the area that I follow. So since 2008, we are supporting disaster preparedness activities in these regions. So far, we allocated since 2008 a little bit more than 50 million euro to support 6 countries, in particular Comoros, Lesotho, Madagascar, Malawi, Mozambique, Namibia, and Zimbabwe. With more than 100 actions or projects implemented by our partners. As you know, ECHO funds directly only its partners in support, of course, of disaster management authorities. So the partners that we fund are United Nations, international organizations, NGOs. ECHO, as humanitarian donors, is aiming to contribute particularly to the priority 4 of the Sendai framework. Those supporting local and national systems to enhance the preparedness and response capability, and of course using and enhancing the existing or setting new early warning system. The priority 4 can only be achieved, of course, if the other priorities are in place. Those ECHO too may support the other priorities to enable success of the priority 4. But I have to say that we have other instruments as the European Union. In fact, the development component is not represented by ECHO, but by another DG DevCo, is supporting in Africa the development and the support of the other priorities. And we try to work together in order to provide an harmonized response. We do believe in early warning system at community and national level. And we are convinced that an early warning system requires strong collaboration with the national DMAs and enhancement and strengthening the community so that they can be part of this early warning system. We in the Southern African region supported the adoption of innovative technologies. In the last few years, for instance, the 930 system in Madagascar, the 510 and WebGIS platform in Zimbabwe, the data winner in in Mozambique, just to give us some example. And we do believe in the importance of the INFORM, Index for Risk Management tools, to be used as a way to allocate resources. By the way, it's one of the criteria that we use is to use INFORM to allocate our resources. Last year, we started with our partners and with a few DMAs at the regional level and also UNDRR and African Union to have, we revamp a regional workshop. One of that was done in November. And it was very useful to find out what has been the impact of our support and what are the things that we should do better. One of the things that was observed is that the use of the crisis modifier was very much a game changer. And partners and DMAs appreciated the role of ECHO in supporting innovative technologies. Some challenges is indeed the lack of common standardized information tools, including common and shared risk profiling information technology. So we really believe that this initiative that the UNDRR is bringing now, it's relevant and appropriate, and it's crucial to have this roadmap. ECHO wants also to further invest in capacity finance and logistics and strengthening linking early warning and early action and adoption risk-based anticipatory action. This is a new approach that we are putting in place for the next years. We also believe that it's important to do more in terms of preparedness in conflict and fragile settings, environment and urban preparedness. And of course, to do that in strong collaboration and partnership with the national DMAs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alexander, not only for your financial contribution, of course, but your vision on how these things should move forward, for supporting us in gathering the interest and the engagement of partners, ECHO partners in particular, in moving forward this agenda together with all of us. And on behalf of ECHO, I thank you also, well, not on behalf of ECHO, through you, I would like to thank you also, ECHO, that was inspiring the development of this roadmap when they hosted delegation of African representative at the European Response and Coordination Center in Brussels, where they had the opportunity to see not only how the situation room works, but also how the entire civil protection mechanism, which is composed by member states and international organizations and scientific actors, really come together to ensure the most effective management of these disasters. Thank you very much. The next one in my list is Charles Mazanji, who is a Senior DNR Officer and DNR Focal Point at the Disaster Management Department Office of the Prime Minister in the United Republic of Tanzania, which was one of the countries that was developing this roadmap during the pilot phase. Charles, the floor is yours for the next 3 minutes because we are really getting late. Thank you very much. You are muted. Now, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Luca, for this invitation, and I thank you for the organization of this important session, of which for us, it will be very informative also for this time to link with you and to understand how we are progressing at country level, at regional, and for UNDRR and the other partners. Basically, I'm going to consider the application of the roadmap on improving availability and access and the use of disaster risk information for early warning in the currently developed national DRR strategy, of which we are on the process to adopt it. It's basically on the final stage. And for real, it considers a lot of the issues which have been addressed in the roadmap on all components of early warning, from disaster risk knowledge, there is an objective which considers those areas of which we focus on enhancing understanding of disaster risk from national to local level. And through this, we understand that currently the most recent developing risk profile have informed also this strategy. And we are focusing also to ensure that we involve scientific and technical institutions to support further downscaling the risk profile basically at the local level, and also to consider developing the risk profile for other hazards which have not been considered when we have been working with UNDRR with technical support from CIMA Foundation. Also, we're focusing on having a single database which will have a compilation of all those risk information in order to ensure that it can be publicly accessible and it can be used to inform different planning from different sectors according to their mandate in different disaster risk. But also, when we are talking on the area on monitoring and forecasting, and the other area for early warning of communication dissemination, also when we are looking at the strategy, it is in line with it through an objective which talk about strengthening multi-hazard and people-centered early warning system within the country. So this basically consider what has been informed within the roadmap, and there is a lot of activities which have been identified there, which will going to work to improve in this area in the case of monitoring and forecasting and communication and dissemination for early warning. So currently, also we are making to ensure that data and information sharing within the institution is well focused. Basically, for this case, we have started to look of the most hazards which are most affecting the country, of which we have the profile now, floods and the droughts. We are working with the Ministry of Water and the Tanzania Meteorological Authority to ensure that there is a good platform so that they can share data and information, and how they can help us at the Prime Minister's office and the overall coordinator and the mandated with early warning to community, how we can make sure that we can communicate it directly to the community and to have one platform which you can easily communicate and make any consideration which is effective on time. Also, we understand that in the previous we've been working, there was an initiative to have a web-based platform through the Uandera platform, which have been piloted also in Tanzania. Also, we are on the process to formalize it and to ensure how to ensure that it is being used for data exchange and information sharing and for early warning purpose. Another area is on preparedness. Another area is on preparedness and response, which also is a component which has been considered within the roadmap. It has been featured also within our strategy, and it has been considered within two objectives. We have one objective which focus on disaster response capacity and relief services, and another one which focus on prevention, mitigation, and preparedness. This also is in line with the roadmap in the area of preparedness and response. And basically, we can talk on some activities which have been considered, basically on the development of contingency plans and the emergency plans. Basically, currently we can focus, and we will use also the risk profile the basis for this task when we are going to implement the strategy. And also there is emphasis on designing and conducting regular simulation exercises within the strategy. And the last one, we have considered the need for, we understand that the community must have knowledge on what is on the ground, and this must come from the authority. So we have given also priority on the issue of public awareness campaign. Also advocacy has been emphasized within the strategy, which also is in line with the roadmap. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charles. Very important to hear from you the elements of your strategy, which clearly indicates the holistic approach that you have used, because you're looking at different components of the strategy, not just focusing on one or two elements. And it's also equally interesting the process that you have adopted in order to have this strategy finalized and now going for a formal adoption at the political level. So I will now like to move to the next contribution, which is Lusayo Ambukege, but I understand from the direction that he is not any longer online. He had some internet challenge probably. And the direction equally informs me that in the chat box there are questions for some of the speakers, of the panelists, particularly Amos. So if you have the time, please reply to the question in the chat box now, otherwise we will collect all of them. And in the second stage, after the workshop, the webinar, we will come back to you all and answer in details the different questions. So accordingly, I would like to now move to our colleagues from OCHA, United Nations Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. Kumudu Sanjeva is online. He's the Senior Information Management Officer. And hopefully he can tell us about the use of secondary data analysis and methodology to explain importance of quantitative risk profile. This is very much important to prioritize the pre-allocation and deployment of assets. Kumudu, the floor is you. 3 minutes, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Hope you can hear me.
Loud and clear.
Okay, right. With the time, I'll start right away. You can go to the next slide, please. So this method that we basically CIMA Foundation also mentioned, they have this modeling. So what we normally do when we do the deployment or the emergency responses on sudden emergencies or sudden disasters, early days we used to do the assessment from the day one. Now we do the analysis based on the secondary data. You can see this kind of a methodology we developed internally, also together with WFP and Pacific Disaster Center. You can see the first one is this risk analysis. So based on the risk analysis that we have, based on the past experience with the disasters, for example, the regular disasters such as annual floods, I mean, these we can already, predict. We can already, know what's happening in most of the countries. So based on that experience, we come up with, this disaster impact modeling or the risk analysis. So when you have a very good risk analysis, it's very, for us, it's really important to, plan our, process. If you really know this, what we are doing with this disaster risk modeling, we try to identify the people with risk or people with people in need, people with most needs or vulnerable people. So when you have this information, then we can, easily understand what are their needs. So for example, with the past experience with the disaster response, if you talk to a water specialist or the health specialist or the food specialist, if you give them the number of people that the number of people in need, then they will tell you how much resources the assess that we need to respond to these people. So when we have this information, then we can plan our capacity and things that we need for the response. Next slide, please. So this quantitative information, we can put it into a kind of a formula. If you already know the people in need from your disaster impact model or from the risk analysis, then you know what the needs for these people, and then you can plan your total requirement and planning your capacity, right? If we can go to one example in the next slide. So this example is actually from Philippines. I used in my presentation. You can see some of these basic information that we used, number of people, male female breakdown, housing types, and the other vulnerabilities. So down there you can see the type 1 heading to this country, and then 5 days ahead we can plan our people in need figures and how many people are in risk, those kind of information. So if we have this information in our hand, then we don't need to wait until the disaster hits, so we can do the pre-positioning, pre-planning. This same thing can be applied into a contingency planning, not only for the sudden onset disasters, even for the other one. If you go to the next slide, I use one example from the Pakistan. For most of the countries that we have, the earthquake-prone countries, you can model the earthquake shaking areas, like modeling that assess. Based on that, we can come up with the shaking zones, and then you have these kind of numbers saying you see people affected and the most vulnerable people, and then we can break down by each categories and their requirements. So with these information, you see, if you have a good risk profile, good risk analysis, then our planning and our pre-positioning is really easy. We can do it properly. So this also support the decision making in like a sudden onset disasters. So with that, I think it's clear that with this example how important is this risk profiling. This is practical use of this risk profiling and risk analysis in our part of the work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kumud. Extremely appreciated seeing OCHA, the focus that and the importance that OCHA gives to these risk profiles, to this quantitative information to plan and organize your deployment and the pre-allocation of your resources and assets. Very important to us to get this information. And I hope that there will be even further cooperation between UNDRR and OCHA to support this effort. Let me now quickly go to the next one, because we have already expired our time allocated for the webinar. I will kindly ask our participants whether it's possible to stay with us for a few more minutes. I would like to give the floor, if Lusaggio is not back online, I would like to give the floor to James Kanyanji, Senior DRR Officer at the African Development Bank. The floor is yours, James. Over.
Luca, this is Katarina. I am sorry, I have had a message from James that he's not feeling well, and the agreement was that either he connects or else we understand that he's unwell.
We'll try to get him on board for the next webinar. Thank you very much, Katarina. So then I will definitely move to the next one, who is Cecilia Ipira, Disaster Risk Reduction Regional Advisor for Africa at the UN Development Program, who can tell us about gap areas which need attention and focus in Africa in this regard. Cecilia, 3 minutes, really maximum. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Luca, and our appreciation to UNDRR for giving us this opportunity also to participate, and we look forward also to participating in the future webinars that you have organized. I was going to talk a little bit on what UNDP is doing on early warning and risk information profiles, but in the interest of time, I would just maybe quickly highlight some of the areas that have not been mentioned, I think, before, are some of the areas that we can focus on learning from this project and going forward. One element, I think, which is critical, we are seeing, again, my perspectives are coming from our engagement with national disaster management agencies, national governments, and UNDP offices at the country level. One of the, I think, areas that needs, I think, more investment is not just generating risk information at the national and subnational level. I think it's keeping these risk profiles updated. We have seen, we are seeing huge environmental changes in Africa, environmental degradation, deforestation, which automatically starts to change some of the risks that these countries face. And maybe a case in point here is Mozambique, where some of the affected areas by Cyclone Idai were not seen as necessarily prone to flood risks. But with deforestation, that has changed automatically the risk profile in these countries. I think there's need to not have static risk profiles, but something that can be generated and updated and maintained over a period of time. The other area that I think maybe needs mentioning, I think it was touched upon earlier, is the governance mechanisms for risk information and specifically on early warning systems. I remember in Mauritius, meeting the Met department where they give early warning information, and they were saying, it's not our mandate to give early warning information. We are supposed to observe and generate and focus data, but somebody else is supposed to analyze that information and see whether early warning information should be issued out or not. So I think the mechanisms for facilitating early action in Africa is still a big gap. We saw this also in Mozambique, where we all knew Cyclone Idai was coming. However, for us to generate the hydrometeorological data that would tell us, what time would the floods arrive? What levels would the floods be? What height? And therefore, which communities should be relocated? This, I think, for Africa is still a huge gap. When we talk about early warning information, I think there's need for us to really look at the whole value chain of early warning. There's a lot of investment, I think, going on hazard detection, on forecasting. But there's very little linkage at the moment going to, okay, what does that information mean? What is the risk analysis to facilitate emergency preparedness? How do we engage the communities? How do we communicate how do we inform communities as well? This is, I think, another area where I see a big gap. The last point, the last 2 points, I see the 30 seconds is up. Is, I think, again, maybe an element of the political economy. We don't really discuss much about the political will, or it links maybe back to the issue of governance. Who is supposed to act on this early warning information? We saw, for example, in 2017, that for SADC region with the 2017 droughts, the whole region received the same early warning information that there will be a drought. Yet some countries were able to act on that information and averted a catastrophe. Some countries, like my country, Malawi, did not act on that information. So how do we get in the political buy-in to support or to enable early action in Africa? The last comment is maybe speaking to the issue that carefully highlighted, the issue of transboundary and regional early warning information and risk information. I think we need both. The case in point, again, is the Cyclone Idai, which showed precisely the need for us to have transboundary early warning information systems. Zimbabwe and Malawi, they are both part of the Zambezi basin. So you cannot only look at early warning system in Malawi without looking at what the implication is on Mozambique. And definitely, I think the region also appreciates the information that's been generated by organizations like ICPAC, and I think we need to build more on this. Thank you for the opportunity. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Cecilia, not only for being concise, but for the elements that you have brought into the discussion, particularly the need to keep the risk profiles as an updated and living document. This is something that even during the pilot phase we have been working on. So for instance, some of the beneficiary countries have already endorsed and reiterated the process to downscale by themselves, so without any external assistance, the generation of risk profiles. This was particularly the case for Angola. And so that there is the capacity in some of these countries already is there the capacity to keep these documents as a living document and keeping engaging the community. Extremely important what you say in terms of legal and institutional framework to ensure that everybody, there is a chain of continuity between the early warning system, who is doing the forecast, who is issuing the early warning system, and what are the actions that this early warning system trigger, both in terms of responders, but also in terms of actions taken by, directly taken by the citizens for their self-protection, because they have to know. And this means that there should be awareness campaigns that are implemented jointly with these programs in order to make these people confident with the early warning messages, and they should know what to do, how to behave once they receive their these messages on what is the upcoming disaster. This is what we call the last mile, and we are going to focus on this even in the next webinar, and which is going to be in a few weeks times. I think that is now, we don't have time to go into real open question and answer session, but please put your questions indicating the specific speaker panelists that you want to address in the chat box. We will collect these and put in, and we'll ensure that the speakers will answer this question, and we will circulate the final outcome document of this webinar with all the participants. To wrap up, I think this is the moment, to correct me, Catalina, if I'm wrong, but I think that this is the right moment to wrap up, and maybe because of the time constraints, we can just say, we can try to pick up what are some of the keywords which emerged during the discussion today. The first one that I recall is fragmentation. Fragmentation of the multiple early warning system that many governments, organizations, implementing partners are working on. Definitely, we do need to find a way to systematize these existing early warning and put them into a more effective one, which can serve multiple purposes. This is not because of let's say harmonize and make comparable the results, but very much relates to the fact that we need to make the best possible use of the limited resources available for this kind of exercise. And I remember some years ago when I was working in a government and presenting at the WMO the cost for the government that was not using data and models paid by different ministries and different departments, even within the same ministry, how many times they were paying the same data and information. So using a common system would cut down significantly even this cost. So it's not only a matter of efficiency and comparison of the result, but it's even about the sustainability of this early warning system. Another keyword which is exactly attached to this concept is partnership. A partnership because we need to assure that whoever has a competence, a skill, a mandate in collecting, analyzing, using this data for early warning system, it's part of this coordination mechanism. Harmonization. Harmonization is another keyword indeed, because we need to make results comparable. Who is going to respond to the emergency needs to know where the first response should be addressed, where the first teams should be deployed, where the first resources to cope with the aftercome of the emergency have to be deployed. This is again extremely relevant. legal and institutional framework, this is probably the first step that we have to take in order to ensure that roles and responsibility of all the different stakeholders are well clarified, and there is a chain of responsibility in place which goes from the data collection and the risk understanding into the forecast system, into the early warning messaging, the transmission of the broadcasting of these early warning messages to the specific target audience, and then this has to be properly used by this end user to take the related specific actions. I don't know whether I'm probably missing some of these keywords that I was trying to take note of during the presentation, but I'm sure I'm missing something now in the rush. Definitely the partnership with the scientific actors is critical. We need to systematically engage African scientific represent stakeholders into our mechanism. We have to use them broadly. They are the ones who can help us in building the capacity to customize and operate this early warning system. Because as long as we are going to build a new center and new capacity in this climatological, meteorological, and disaster risk reduction center, we need also to equip these centers with appropriate and knowledgeable staff. I think that this is my very, very last comment. I would just like to give the floor back to Amjad for the conclusion, and then I will like to invite you to the next webinar. We will circulate soon the invitation for the next event. And jointly with this, I hope that we will be able to send immediately out the report of this webinar with the answer to all your questions. Again, from my side, thank you very much. Amjad, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Luca. You've concluded us quite comprehensively, given the time, so I don't have really much to add, except to say a gracious thank you to all the participants, and to yourself, Luca and Katerina, for bringing these key players together. Of course, I'm very pleased that we were able to look at the regional overview, the sub-regional overview, as well as the national overview, and it's a nice cascading approach to address these risk profiling and early warning issues. We obviously have a long way to go, but I'm glad to see that we've actually started, and the basis, as Roberto said earlier, the basics and the pillars, the initial pillars have already been set up. And now we need to ensure that we have the ability to translate this science into practice and make it more easily understood to the policymakers, the politicians, and show their mind so they can implement it. So I'm very pleased by that, and I'm hoping that the participants and attendees will continue in the next webinars, where we'll be going much more in depth into these areas, and we'll be able to address the gaps and get the advice and guidance that is needed. So that's of critical importance. I also want to recognize that in addition to African Union and IGAD, I've also noted that SADC and ECAS are also other sub-regional organizations who have this issue is quite important to them as well, and I'm glad that they were listening, and hopefully we'll be able to move to the sub-regional level. Special thanks, of course, to my UN colleagues and non-UN partners, and very good, very much thank you also to the national governments, Tanzania, and unfortunately Zambia was not available. So I just want to stop here and give a special thanks not only to the panelists themselves, the EU and ECHO and other partners, not only who spoke, but also on the attendees list. And special thanks also specifically to the attendees, not only the panelists, for actually spending this time with us. And I've noticed from the questions that were coming in, we have a big job in front of us. They're very in-depth questions, very informed questions. And I think in the future, webinars will be able to entertain much more of those, and maybe have certain discussions on them and exchange views. So that I just wanted to thank everybody and my colleagues and my team in the Africa office for organizing this webinar, and I look forward to working with all the partners who attended this webinar in the future. And it is indeed a privilege and an honor for us to be taking this forward. Thank you very much. Back to you.
Thank you very much, Amjad, for your kind words, and also from my side, a big thank you going to not only the speakers, the panelists, the donors who have supported us financially, but also some often giving us guidance on how and sharing their knowledge and experience on how to move these things forward. But again, big thanks to all the participants, thanks to the team who has facilitated the organization of this webinar, not only within UNDRR, but the African Union Commission, our scientific partners, CIMA, and all the rest who have worked in the background of this. Thank you very much, and see you in a few weeks' time. All the best. Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Bye bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Well done.
Bye bye.
Done.
Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Luca.
Bye, Kai. Thank you.
Kai. Bye bye, Kai.